Hey guys, it's your friendly neighborhood graphic designer here for a new tutorial. This one is specifically for t-shirt designs, and if you've ever wanted to create really rustic, vintage, distressed looking prints on your t-shirts, this is how we do it. So I thought today, let me put together a t-shirt design tutorial, something you might not know, another little tool for your arsenal. I wouldn't suggest that this technique that I'm going to show you be used in every single design you create, because it's really, you can use it wrong in many ways, but for certain designs it can just take it to the next level. So if you love those vintage style looks on a t-shirt that looks all rough and worn, even though it's brand new, this is how to do it. It's a super simple technique. I'm going to show you in Adobe Illustrator, and I have all the texture files you need. So I've created 4 from scratch. Feel free to use them however you see fit. They are yours. To access them, down below, I've created a blog post that explains this method as well. And if you scroll right to the bottom of the blog post, there's a little link that you can download. I've made 4 textures. It's in one Illustrator file, so you'll just have to cut them out and paste them into your file as and when you need them. And I hope you can make some really cool designs with them. So feel free. So before I go into the tutorial, I want to explain how this method works and why it's so cool. So when you download the textures, what you'll notice is they're all transparent textures, which means it's made up of black and transparent space. And ultimately, the black areas are going to become the transparent areas in your design. Make sense? So we're going to use these vector textures as an opacity mask. So to show you an example, here we have a circle. And here's the texture we're using on top of the circle. And now we're going to use that texture to cut out from the circle. And you can see that that's fully transparent. So it's a great way to add a vintage feel to your designs. And what's fantastic about this method is it's what's called a live effect. So if you don't like how that looks, it's not going to affect your original design. You just delete it. You can resize it. You can rotate it, you can do whatever you want with it, and it's not going to affect the original design. If you decide it doesn't work, delete it, your design remains unchanged. Perfect. Right guys, so here I am in Illustrator. I've prepared 4 designs, separate, slightly different designs for you. So you can see how different textures look on different designs, but I'm just going to take you through as I do one of them. I have my textures already in Illustrator for ease, but do note that if you have a lot of vector textures in one document, it can cause Illustrator to run a little slowly because it's having to compute all of these different little bits and pieces, and it can get a bit sluggish. So keep that in mind. But for the most part, in any composition you're putting together, you're probably going to only use one texture at a time. So you shouldn't have a problem. Okay, so we're going to look at this text design over here. So I'm just going to, let's pull our texture a little closer and we'll zoom into this design. Okay, so what you can see already, I do this every time I prepare any shirt design, is I make outlines of any text that I use, just to avoid any discrepancies in the print. It's always good practice, whether you're creating editorial graphic design like posters or anything that has text in. Before print, it's always a good idea to create outlines. So effectively, you're turning the text into a shape. And in Illustrator, to do that, you just right-click on any text and select Create Outlines. So I've done that already. I've grouped all my text together, and that's really important. That's your first step, is to make sure everything that you want to apply the texture to is grouped. So while I've got all of this grouped, I'm going to go into my transparency panel up here. Now, if you don't have the setup I do, and you don't see this transparency panel, all you need to do is go to Window, transparency, and it'll pop up. Right, so let me go into my transparency panel. And what happens when I click this is it's giving me my options to create my opacity mask. So I've got two boxes. I've got one over here that contains my design, and the second box is where we're going to basically place our texture. And whatever's placed in there is going to affect the design over here. Make sense? Okay, so first things first is I want to cut this texture out from here and paste it into this box. So I'm just going to select my texture. As you can see when I select it, you can see that all of these are vector shapes, and that's really important to make masks that are vectorized so they can be resized without losing any quality. So we're going to select this, which should all be grouped. Never ungroup this. You'll be left with all of these little shapes as separate images. You do not want that. The textures I provided to you are already grouped, so keep them like that. So I'm just going to press Ctrl X and I'm going to cut it. So I'm just going to select my design again because this is where I want to apply the opacity mask. And now that we have our transparency panel open again, I'm going to double click on this empty box. Right, everything's disappeared, which is exactly how it should look. And I'm going to Ctrl V to paste my texture. Now, if I deselect it, you can't see anything. This is what it should do, guys, so don't stress. So while this is selected, I'm just going to place it over where my design is. I can edit this at a later stage, so don't be too finicky about it now. So while I still have my texture selected, I just want to go deselect clip. Make sure that both invert mask and clip are deselected and your blending mode is at normal. Opacity should be at 100% already. Okay, so I'm still in effect in this texture mode, so I can't actually select anything else on my document while that is in effect. So I'll need to select my texture again and then click onto my design and we should be back to normal. So now I can move this design wherever I want and that texture is still applied to it. Isn't that absolutely awesome? I love it. Such a simple thing to do. And that is it, guys. There is nothing more to it. If I select this now and I decide that this texture is not quite working as I want it to, I want it bigger or smaller, I just select it. Make sure I select where the texture mask is applied. So click on the second box. Now I can see my texture again. And then I can resize this, make it bigger. Click back on my design. See how I like that look. Just undo that. I can make it smaller so there's a bit more detail in the texture. But sometimes with more detail you can lose the integrity of your text, so be careful. Click back on my design and there you have it. This actually works really, really well with this texture because there's nice big blocks of color. So that always works well with the texture applied. Sometimes if you have text that's too thin or designed with just very, very thin elements, you can lose a lot of that clarity when you apply textures. So play around with this method, see what you can do. So let me take you through one more. We'll do this yin yang one. I'm going to, again, I've got my shapes, everything is grouped, so I'm ready to rock and roll. Select my texture, Ctrl X to cut it, select my design, go to my transparency panel, double click on the blank square, Ctrl V to paste my texture, make sure it lies over my design, deselect clip, click back on the box containing my design, and there we have it. Super, super simple, guys. And if I ever wanted to remove this effect completely, if I played around with it, it still wasn't looking like I wanted it to look, all you have to do is select your design and press release. And then you can get rid of your texture and your design is completely unchanged. So let me quickly just do the rest of these designs so we can see how these different textures look on different types of designs. And there you have it, guys. A quick and easy way to add that vintage feel to any design. Like I say, these don't work on every design. Even this is pushing it a little bit because some of these elements are very, very thin, but somehow it works. So play around. These 4 textures that I've used here are the same 4 textures that I've supplied in the package on the blog. So if you go down to the bottom of the video, click on the blog link, scroll down to the bottom of that blog post, you'll see a little link to download these textures and have fun with them. Feel free to share any designs that you make with me. Probably Twitter's your best bet. I have my Twitter information at the end of this video, so share any cool designs that you've done. Or if you want me to critique anything that you've done, I'd be happy to. In the meantime, you guys take care, and I will see you very soon.